Thank you for joining us today. I am Abby Spradsky, a member of the class of 2014, and I completed my MBA at the Simon School in 2019. I am also a member of the Alumni Board, a group made up of 21 members representing each of the university's schools with the purpose of engaging all alumni and students in a lifelong connection with one another and with the university. Today's lecture is part of a series launched back in April 2020 called Experience Rochester that exemplifies the university's commitment to lifelong learning. The series features topics and speakers unique to the university. We have a wide range of registrants joining us for this session, including students, parents, alumni, and many prospective UR students. Now, I would like to introduce today's speakers. Dr. Ray Dorsey is the David M. Levy Professor of Neurology at the University of Rochester Medical Center. In 2020, Dr. Dorsey and his colleagues wrote Ending Parkinson's Disease, a book that provides a prescription for ending the world's fastest growing brain disease. Ehsan Hope is an associate professor of computer science at the University of Rochester. He is an expert in human-computer interaction and is a pioneer in developing algorithms and practical systems that help people hone their speaking and social skills. In 2020, Professor Hope was selected by the National Academy of Medicine as one of 10 emerging leaders to collaborate with the organization on sparking transformative change to improve healthcare for all. At the end of the session, our speakers will answer as many questions from our audience as time will allow. You can put your questions into the Q&A box on your screen at any time. Wendy Heinzelman, Dean of the Hagem School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, will moderate the Q&A session. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll turn it over now to Dr. Dorsey.
Abby, thank you very much for that kind introduction. So today, the world's fastest growing brain disease is not Alzheimer's disease, it's actually Parkinson's disease. From 1990 to 2015, the number of people with Parkinson's disease in the world more than doubled. And if we do nothing, if we maintain the status quo, the number will double again to over 13 million people. Today, 1.2 million Americans have the disease, and that's why we wrote this book, Ending Parkinson's Disease. I understand there's lots of students. If anyone wants a free copy of the book, just put your address and name in the chat, and we'll mail one out to you this week. And Parkinson's disease has three big challenges. The first question is why? So why is Parkinson's disease the fastest growing brain disease? And it's growing faster than aging would suggest that it should. Not going to be the topic for today's discussion, but we're investigating some of the underlying causes of the rise in Parkinson's disease. And we think some of these are due to industrial chemicals, including those used previously in dry cleaning and degreasing and carpet cleaners and whiteout and decaffeinating coffee. So maybe we'll have that for another topic. But there are two other challenges that we're going to address today with Professor Hope. The second is that a lot of people in the world with Parkinson's disease are undiagnosed. In fact, you can make the argument that most people with Parkinson's disease are undiagnosed. Studies have suggested that in the Netherlands that 12% of people with Parkinson's disease are undiagnosed. In Mississippi, a study conducted in the 1970s said it was 40%. In Beijing, it's 48%. In rural Bolivia, it's 100%. And Parkinson's is a treatable condition. So we need to find better ways to identify and diagnose people with Parkinson's disease so that we can give them appropriate treatment. We don't let people with seizures continue to have, we shouldn't let people with seizures continue to have seizures because that's treatable too, just like a Parkinson's disease is. The third big challenge is that our treatments are old. They're older than me. The most effective medication for Parkinson's disease is a drug called levodopa. It was developed in the 1960s. There are few medical conditions or neurological conditions for which the most effective treatment is over 50 years old. And one of the reasons that all our treatments are old is because we have really, really bad ways of measuring the effects of medications. If you have nice objective measures of disease, if you can measure the amount of HIV in somebody's blood, you can rapidly tell whether a new drug is going to lower the amount of HIV in the blood, therefore tell if it's likely to be effective. We don't have those good markers in the blood for assessing Parkinson's disease. But we do have external manifestations. So people with Parkinson's disease have decreased facial expression. They have softer voices. They have slower movements. And right now, the only way we assess that is when they come see a clinician like me and we rate them on a subjective categorical scale from 0 to 4. but we have great colleagues like Professor Hoke and computer scientists and engineers and Dr. Heinzelman's Hagen School of Engineering, who are coming up with objective, sensitive ways of measuring disease. And these measurements don't need to be done in the clinic, but they can be done in people's homes, and increasingly they can be done over smartphones. And with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Hope, who's going to tell you about some of the work and research that he's doing to help us get better, facilitate diagnosis of Parkinson's, so anyone anywhere can be diagnosed with the disease, so we can get better measures of the disease, so we can get better treatments faster for those with the disease. Asa.
Thanks, Ray. And good to see 537 people join in today. That's incredible. And I wish this was in person instead, so we could all see you and engage with you directly. So let me share my screen so I can share some things we have learned through time. So time that I'm with you today, this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm a professor of computer science. Why worry about Parkinson's disease? Then talk about the benefit of being right next to University of Rochester Medical Center, and how that enables us to do stuff that we couldn't do anywhere else. I'll provide some high-level technical details of how some of the technology works, so we have the intuition. I will give you a live demo of the technology and share some details about what's next. All right, so let's get started. So why Parkinson? I have to share a personal story here. When I was a first-year PhD student, my mother was diagnosed with final stage cancer patient. So at that time, I dropped out of school and spent that 1 year with her, taking care of her. One of the side effects she had was involuntary tremor in her body. So after trying for several months, we saw a neurologist, and the neurologist gave us the medication that Ray Dorsey talks about, levodopa. So we took the medication, and I would give it to my mother days and nights. That drug worked like magic. The tremors went away, and we were so happy. We were supposed to follow up with the neurologist, but we just never did because it takes a lot of time and effort. After several months, the medication stopped working, and the tremors came back with many side effects. So my mother passed away after a few months, but that experience really baffled me. And this was a picture of my mother in 2008, just talk about that experience. So fast forward into 2016, just all of a sudden, I sent an email to a hotshot neurologist, Ray Dorsey, out of the blue, saying that, hey, would you like to have a conversation? I have some radical ideas about Parkinson and its early diagnosis. Of course, he agreed, and we just had a conversation, and he was immediately able to tell us the sweet spot where technology could have a profound impact. For example, if somebody has Parkinson's disease, you give them a medication, but then you want them to be able to perform the neurological test so that based on that assessment, you can fine-tune the dosage. And if you do that, then you can have a treatable condition. So together, we had a vision like this. So imagine anybody from any part of the world can go to a website, turn on their webcam, and perform a set of neurological tests that you would in a clinic, but now you can do this from home. And as you perform the test, perhaps using computer algorithm, we can quantify that movement and provide an assessment whenever they want, wherever they want. So that was the grand vision. Now the question is, how do you go about realizing it? So together we built a framework, parktest.net, where you can go out now and donate your data for research. And using the framework, we were able to collect a huge amount of data from all over the world, performing different kind of tasks. So in the next few slides, I'll show you some examples of data that we have collected. Here, some individuals doing finger tapping from their home. One of the tasks, fist open and close. pronation, supination, one other task. The data is from all over the world. Postural tremor. We have one on expression, so where they're supposed to make expression, like disgusted face. Smiling face, which is what the topic is about, how the smile tells us unique information, whether somebody has Parkinson's or not. More on that later. Pretending to be surprised.
One, two, three.
We have task on moving your head in different direction. We have task on head pose as well. Now, there are one great thing about this data set and one bad thing about this data set. The good thing is now we have data from all over the world representing the real world. That means if you build an algorithm using this data, it's more likely to work for everybody versus one particular demographic. So that's a good thing. The bad thing is if you notice the data, it's very noisy. The different lighting conditions are there. Hands moving out of the camera a lot. So if I don't see you, how do I even analyze you? People often don't follow instructions. So how do you deal with that? If you look at the camera, there are different positions. Now, ideally in computer science, you want to work with clean data so that you have a high accuracy. But then when you try to apply it in the real world, it doesn't work because real world is very different. So for example, if I want to build a classifier that can recognize cats in a video, this would be the examples of cats. But then when you go in the real world, this is what you find, right? So that's the dilemma. So in our case, we wanted to work with a real world challenging data set and push on the analytics side so that we can make it work eventually by using tricks. So for example, here, this is the state-of-the-art computer vision algorithm that can recognize the entire body. So I'm going to show the video here.
Open Gangnam Style.
This is the state-of-the-art
Gangnam Style.
dancing.
Open Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Open Gangnam Style.
And things may just
Open Gangnam Style.
Let me give you some more example of trying this technique on the data that we have collected. This is an example of a healthy individuals who don't have Parkinson. And it does a fairly decent job in recognizing the body positions. So let's try it with somebody who have Parkinson. So as you can tell, the background is noisy, it doesn't do a pretty good job on the other hand. Makes a lot of mistakes. Let me play one more video. Hopefully the loading will stop. And you can tell that there is somebody in the background, it's tracking the person as well, and not tracking the hand at all. So the best algorithm in the world applied to solve a problem doesn't work. So what do you do? So that's where you can be creative with the technique that you built in. So in the next few slides, I will show you some of the tricks that we have tried in a very high level. So here we have the videos where people are moving their fingers, right? And we want to use computers to be able to automatically quantify them. So how do you do that? So using computer, I can automatically segment the video where they're doing the task versus like first time when you go to the site, you go to the webcam, you try to turn that on. And once you're done, right here, you're trying to turn that off. So we can automatically delete the irrelevant segment and get the relevant segment. And then we can blur out the background. So we only analyze the person who's performing the task and nobody else. And here we tried a very simple algorithm called motion magnification. So what does it mean? So imagine if you have a small image and if you try to blow it up, what happens? you start seeing a lot more patterns in the image when you blow it up, right? So same idea, I take the video and kind of blow it up. And once you do that, you start seeing patterns that were previously invisible. And using such intuition, we can classify between Parkinson versus not Parkinson with close to 90% accuracy. One other area was head movement. I'm sure you recognize him, Michael J. Fox. In this clip, he wasn't even speaking, he's listening. And as you can tell, while he's even listening, he has involuntary movement that we can track fairly well. And the idea is that, okay, if I can track that, is there some unique information about recognizing whether somebody has Parkinson's or not? So I'll skip through some of the details here, but here's the intuition. So here you can see 6 different head movement: TX, TY, TZ, RX, RY, and RZ. Maybe you can take a guess as to which of this channel or which of this direction has information about Parkinson. It's TX, moving the head in this direction. So that's something we were able to figure out, and we're able to apply this to the algorithm we have built. One other very interesting finding was the way you smile has unique characteristics of whether you have Parkinson's or not. So let me explain this. All right, so here I have a video. So x-axis corresponds to my video, and y-axis corresponds to a signal called smile, let's say. So how well you're smiling. So if you're smiling a lot, then you should have a really high. It goes here and then comes down. So you can tell we have this 2 graph, one for Parkinson and one for non-Parkinson, non-PD. And there are some differences. So when you see this 2 graph, we were scratching our head, like, okay, what does it mean? What's going on in here? And that's where a collaboration with somebody like Ray Dorsey was very insightful, because you could immediately tell that individuals who have Parkinson, like here, based on the signal, means they have less flexibility when they smile. So they go smile and then comes down. Versus here, individuals with non-PD, when they smile, they have a lot more modularity the way they smile. You can see a subtlety into the signal. And from there, we realized that, you know what? This is unique information. So for example, when you take a selfie these days, what do? You take your camera and you do this, and you try to smile. And the camera is pretty smart because it doesn't really take a frame. It captures a video, a couple of seconds. And from that video, it finds the right frame where you're looking the best and shows you the frame. So imagine if you give permission, perhaps your phone can analyze your selfies where you're more likely to be smiling and give you a referral in case you're showing early signs of Parkinson. So that's another interesting finding. So I'm going to talk about one other quick finding before I give you a live demo. So here, this person is performing a speech task.
The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The dog wakes up and follows the fox into the forest. But again, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
So in case you didn't realize that that sentence
The quick brown fox
is
that
sentence is something called pangram. That means the sentence has all the alphabets from A to Z. And also, by the time they come here, they're repeating the same sentence. And when you look at the signals, we notice that by the time they come here, many of these individuals are running out of breath. They're pausing at unique places that are not visible when you just listen to it, but computer technology can quantify it in a very subtle way. So using computer technology, now we can look at not only how you smile, but how you speak. Now, what's the implication of this? I'm sure many of you have Alexa or Google Home at home. So as you engage with those devices, perhaps with your permission, they can analyze your speech characteristics and give you some signs or early referrals in case you are showing early signs of Parkinson. All right, so now the exciting part. Now I can show you, okay, given the algorithm, how do you kind of put it all together and then perhaps deploy it so that anybody from any part of the world can perform this task and get a probability of whether they have Parkinson's or not. So let me try that right now. So I'm going to open my browser and I'm going to get started right here. I'm going to log in and I come to this site and it tells me that I need to perform 5 tasks involving speech, motor, and facial. That's going to require a couple of minutes. So I will get started. Hit the start button and I need to follow some instructions.
Make sure your face is still within the record frame and just recite this sentence. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The dog wakes up and follows the fox into the forest. But again, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog.
Okay, so it asked me to say this thing, so I'm going to try that. I'm going to hit on start. It gives me a couple of seconds to get started. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The dog wakes up, follows the fox into the forest. But again, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. I'm done. Finish. Go on to the next one.
So you're going to tap your index finger and your thumb together 10 times as quickly and as big as possible. So you'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Sorry, the audio video is out of sync, but you get the idea. So I'm going to do that. So I will start. It gives me a couple of seconds to get started. I'm done with that. So I'm going to move on to the next task.
In this task, you will make the biggest smile that you can, alternating with a neutral face, and you will do that 3 times, like this.
Okay, I need to smile 3 times. So let me try that. I'll hit the start button. I'm done with that task. I have 2 more tasks left.
In this task, you will make the most disgusted face that you can, alternating with a neutral face, and you will repeat this 3 times, like this.
Okay, let me try that. And the final task.
In this task, you will move your eyebrows up as high as you can, and then down as low as you can, 3 times slowly, like this.
Okay, let me try that. All right, I'm done with all the tasks. Now I'm going to hit next, and now it's going to take 2 minutes to be able to analyze all the data that I just provided, and at the end, give me a probability of whether I have Parkinson's or not. So now that I have 2 minutes left, I want to go back to the slide and talk about certain things and come back again once it's here. But it's going to do the facial analysis first, and once that's done, it's going to look at the motor movement that I've done and try to look at the movement. And for the final task, we'll be looking at the expressions. And in the end, I should see a probability. So we talked about Parkinson. I think this is something we can come back to during the Q&A. But how about other movement disorders like ataxia, Huntington disease, progressive supranuclear palsy, as well as multiple system atrophy? So our grand vision is to be able to use the technology to be able to quantify a family of movement disorders and see if it can not only serve Parkinson, but also other conditions. in fact, in our ongoing work, we're also looking at ataxia, which is a family of movement disorder. And using similar technology, we can quantify the way they move around in the lab setting. So you can tell this person is ataxia. He has been asked to be able to move in one line and he's struggling. And using technology, we can quantify all the subtlety of the movement that's difficult for a practitioner to do. And one exciting thing is that many of these old homes already have cameras in place. So if they give us permission, perhaps the way they walk could be automatically analyzed, and we can give people referral in case they're showing signs of ataxia. All right, on that note, I think it should come back, and it did. So it says, I'm very unlikely to have Parkinson's disease. So it also gives me probability from speech, face, and motor. So from speech, the way I spoke, I only have 3% probability of having Parkinson's disease. From facial movement, remember, I've done 3 mimicry tasks. I only have 2.4% probability of having Parkinson. And from the finger tapping task, I only have 2.7% probability of having Parkinson's disease. So it's fairly negligible. As a result, the system gives me a probability that, you know what, you are less likely to have Parkinson. So this is on the diagnosis or screening part. We also have an ongoing effort where we can quantify the severity of the tremor. So somebody who has Parkinson, taking the levodopa medication, but then cannot come to a clinic. What if, so we can also, they can also come here and perform the same task, and we can quantify this. So on that note, I think that's all I had to say. I see many questions in the chat, so I would love to welcome back Wendy and Ray to be able to answer all of your exciting questions.
Great, thank you so much, Isan. That was really fabulous work, and thank you, Ray, as well, for sharing your insights here. We have a number of questions that have come in through the live chat, but also questions that were asked in advance. And I'm going to start with a question that I think is really key. So you talked about these being used to detect Parkinson's, but do you see, for either of you, is there potential for this technology or something along the lines of this technology to be used to monitor progression or assess response to therapy? So could you imagine having a similar type of website where you're doing these types of either facial mimicry or motor mimicry or speech that could allow you to see how the disease has progressed? And as you said, talk about, response to medication, so that maybe it could help to determine if you need more or less medication or something along those lines.
Lisa?
Yes, we can. In fact, the stuff I showed, it's 1 year old. There is a difference between what we can deploy and what's happening in the lab. So right now we have an algorithm that we're building that can quantify the tremors from 0 to 4. 4 means severe, 0 means none. So it's ongoing, and we hope that that will be in place as well soon. So answer to your question is yes, absolutely. We want to serve both populations.
And Ray, from a medical perspective, do you think that will be as effective, less effective from a physician's perspective? Do you see this as being something that will guide you to what you do, or is the definitive answer?
I think these are useful guides, and I think they're going to be really useful for evaluating the effectiveness of new treatments. So if you think about it, you want an assay. What do you want in an assay? You want it to be objective, you want it to be continuous, you want it to be sensitive, and you want it to be able to be done by anyone, anywhere. And all of our current measures are everything but that. And so ASAN and then some of our colleagues in ASAN's in your group, Jabo Liu and others, are developing objective measures of the disease that are likely to be sensitive and can assess response to treatment. And the sooner we can tell whether a drug works, the sooner we can advance that to definitive clinical trials, and the sooner we can bring it to patients.
Great, fabulous. So a question that came in through the Q&A is that a lot of people are not completely natural and comfortable in front of a camera. You see people, you can always tell when someone's taking a selfie versus some other kind of picture, because it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's not as natural as sort of just talking in front of another human. So how often does this uneasiness contribute to creating errors, and how do you manage that?
Right, it's a good question. I mean, the data set that we have collected where people intentionally came in here and then turn on their webcam and perform the task. So we don't really have data where people are unintentionally trying to create selfies. So in the data that we have collected, people intentionally came in here and they performed the task. But if you were to look at the data that people are contributing to us, they're taking selfies, I'm sure there'll be a lot of cases where we don't have good, reliable videos of smile. So we need to look at the videos where we have a nice onset and offset. And if you have those videos, only those could be analyzed and perhaps give a referral. So not all the selfies is usable. I think a subset of them might be helpful.
And did you find people were kind of at ease, especially those who have Parkinson's, in using the technology? Because, you know, one of the things is that not all, but many Parkinson's patients are older and maybe less comfortable with technology. Did you find any issue with getting older patients comfortable using the technology?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, our students are in their 20s, right? And then the way they use technology is very different than somebody who in their 50s or 60s would. So it's really important that you understand that population and build technology accordingly. So in our case, our goal is to that many of these individuals should be able to navigate the site just by pressing on one key, let's say the space key, because they can use a mouse, they cannot type. So just by tapping the mouse space bar, can they still perform the tasks? That was the challenge. And that's how the interface was designed. Of course, there is a fragment of population who are so severe that they can use site. And I think that's the population we cannot serve.
And then let me take the flip side of the technology. I'll tell you technology that's not user-friendly for older people with Parkinson's disease, and that's a car. And so we know that driving ability is impaired early in Parkinson's disease, and that limits the ability of people with Parkinson's disease to be seen. It puts additional burden on caregivers, and it's a lot of cost and time, and it's not green. So, you know, these are tools and technologies that ASON and others are developing that bring research, that bring care in the future directly to participants and to patients instead of asking patients and participants to come see us on our terms.
Right. And along those lines, a couple of questions have come in about, will this technology ever replace doctors? Like, would this, you know, is there going to be a time when there's not really a need to have clinicians who are seeing patients and all can be done with technology? What are both of your thoughts on sort of how technology either augments or replaces physicians in these types of processes?
So I'll start. There just aren't enough doctors. You know, if everyone with Parkinson's disease could see a Parkinson's specialist, it'd be great. But in the United States, 40% of people with Medicare, with health insurance, don't see a neurologist of any kind within 4 years of diagnosis. Not seeing a Parkinson's specialist, not a neurologist of any kind. And those that don't have worse health outcomes. In China, the estimates are there's somewhere between 2 to 4 million people with Parkinson's disease, and there's about 100 Parkinson's specialists for all of China. Southeast Asia, it's, you know, similarly. Most people don't get the care that they need. If we have tools and technologies that allow people to make evaluations themselves or are assisted in that evaluation, and then those individuals can be identified and screened and then connected to clinicians, that can only be a positive thing.
Well, let me follow up on that a little bit. Do you think physicians will trust this? Will, you know, I mean, obviously you do and you will, but those who are unfamiliar with the technology, how open do you think physicians are to utilizing this technology to help cut down on the workload or on the need to see so many patients?
I think in the end, it doesn't matter what physicians think. A good example is diabetes. So in the old days, if you had diabetes, you got your insulin dose based on what your finger stick, your blood glucose measurement was in the clinic. Then all of a sudden you were able to measure your blood glucose at home. And then you could dose your insulin based on that. And now you can get your blood glucose measured continuously by an indwelling pump that samples your sugar levels in your fluid, and therefore your insulin is dosed based on that with no input from you or a clinician. I think if people gain more control over their care, sense of self-efficacy leads to better outcomes. There could be some downsides to this. I was speaking hyperbole, But I think generally these things are about empowering individuals with the disease and extending care and research opportunities to people instead of localizing them in institutions.
And diabetes is a great example because I give the same example. So imagine diabetes 50 years ago, where you have to come to a clinic and then get your sugar checked. I think that's where Parkinson is today. And I think there's an opportunity to make it very treatable, like diabetes, with the use of technology.
A bunch of other questions have come in around the ethical use of this technology, right? So you're gathering images, videos, audio, potentially, obviously with permission, but there's a lot of information and data there. And whenever you gather information like that, there's the opportunity for it to be used for ill as well as for good. You can imagine insurance companies getting a hold of this and changing their procedures based on data. You could imagine hackers getting in and getting access to the data. Have you thought, I'm sure you've thought about the security issues, the ethical issues of this. What are your thoughts about the ethics of this, both the pros and the cons, as well as the security features? And, what special things have you done, like not storing the video? Are videos stored after you get them? Those sorts of things. Can you speak to some of the ethical issues on this?
Right, we had to do a lot of back and forth with the IRB to get that right. So the way it's structured is that we store the data for a certain number of years to be able to train the algorithms, but after a certain duration, we delete the videos. And right now we are using the university's recommended services to store the video in a secure server, which is how the URMC does it. So it's safe and secure. But I think the bigger question is, the ethical question is, okay, let's say somebody comes to the site and perform the task, and we realize that they're more likely to have Parkinson. So do I tell it to them? And that's it, because at the time they may have more questions. They may want to talk to a neurologist, and we can't give them that just yet. And what if we make a mistake? Because I like technology, but I want to acknowledge with humility that technology makes mistakes. And when it does, who takes liability? So those are the questions that remain to be addressed. And also one of the things, how do we empower somebody who's coming here? So let's say we say, okay, you're more likely to have Parkinson, but can we immediately give them access to resources so they feel empowered? So we have the demo where, you can, if you're high likelihood of having Parkinson, we can show you, okay, who are the neurologists nearby? What are the support groups nearby? What are the things you can follow to be able to manage your health? So it's not just about giving them the information, but giving them relevant information to empower them.
So in 2008, the late Congresswoman Louise Slaughter, on her 16th attempt, got a bill called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act passed. The late Senator Kennedy called it the first major civil rights bill of the new century. And that bill prevented discrimination by employers and health insurers based on genetic information. I think we need a HINA, a Health Information Non-Discrimination Act, to protect health information that Professor Hoke and others are collecting in wide different varieties. We need public policies to prevent discriminations and have high penalties attributed to it. And we also need to stop the secondary markets about selling health information that's being sold on you, me, and everyone else listening without our explicit consent.
Right. So a bunch of questions have come in about the technology itself and how it works. For example, how did you get good data sets for to be able to train your models, and how to have enough data to be able to train your models accurately? You need lots and lots of data that is very diverse to be able to get accurate results in the end. How did you actually get the data?
I think that's where the collaboration with URMC was critical, because if you look at any of the paper from the computer science side published, they probably looked at 50 to 100 data points, and they all come to a clinic, and you have amazing quality videos and good background, and then excellent videos and you have really good results. In our projects, we have so far collected close to 1,000 examples of Parkinson and 1,000 examples of non-Parkinson, which is the highest anybody has done. We agree that this is still low. I think we need to get to 5,000, but compared to what others have done, we have come a long way. And URMC has played a major role because with their help, we could go to support homes where people cannot come to a clinic. We can get their data. We can get data from people from different socioeconomic background.
Right.
We can, since it's online, we can get data outside of Rochester, outside of the United States if you want. So it's a diverse data, and we have the platform in place, and the data collection is ongoing. So we have a grant from Moore Foundation that's until 2024. So data collection is part of the process. So we hope to get to 5,000 data points of people from different backgrounds.
And just like, so there's a lot of work involved. And so Aeson's being kind and highlighting the medical center's activities, but the people who make this work are actually all those young people. So all those young people that you saw are either research assistants hanging out with me behind this glass window. And normally they'd be here, but in the time of COVID, where a lot of us are remote, or undergraduate or graduate students working with Professor Hoke. So some of you are prospective students, you know, you can hang out with Professor Hoke. He's always looking for really talented computer scientists, and I'm always looking for really talented people who like doing clinical research. And so a lot of this work and a lot of the co-authors in our publications are either undergraduates or grad students working with Professor Hoke, or research assistants or undergrads working, or med students working with me.
Fabulous. And you know, you showed the demo. Is this something that people can do right now, can go to? Are you kind of crowdsourcing in some sense to get data from just thousands and thousands of people?
So right now, anybody from here can go to parktest.net and donate the data, even though right now we're collecting data from individuals who do have Parkinson. So if you don't have Parkinson, we don't need your data, but you're welcome to visit the site.
Yeah.
Not yet, right? So that's on that side, but on the feedback side, it's deployed, but we don't have permission to just widely distribute it just yet. We want to go through the right channel, hopefully get an approval from FDA before we can widely disseminate it. Because if you want this to be independent, there are certain metrics we need to hit, and that's why we're working with FDA to tell us exactly what they want, what kind of accuracy we need to have. If you want this to work in tandem with a neurologist, there has to be a certain metric we need to hit. So we want to hit all those metrics before we can widely distribute this.
Okay, great. Well, that's very helpful to know. Ray, a question for you that came up about, for those who have parents diagnosed with Parkinson's and are concerned about getting it, what are things that you should be thinking about? What are resources to stay on top of this? Any tips or advice for those who have parents with Parkinson's?
So one, just building on Professor Hoke's comment. So if you have Parkinson's, you can go, or your parents have Parkinson's, they can go to parktest.net and participate in in the research study right now. It's an IRB approved study, and you can do it right now while you're listening. So we need to figure out why people have Parkinson's disease. And our book argues that Parkinson's disease is to a large extent preventable. So Dr. James Parkinson described the condition in 1817. He's a 61-year-old doctor, and he says, I'm describing something that's not been classified in medical literature, and quite frankly, it's new. And it was a really rare disease when he's describing it, because he's not going to get out of bed and write a case series on 6 individuals unless it's something new. And now it's the world's fastest growing brain disease. So how do you go from something that's rare to exceedingly common in 200 years? It's not genetics, it's the environment. And there are numerous pesticides, industrial chemicals, including trichloroethylene, air pollution, and heavy metals that have all been linked to Parkinson's. And we need to prevent exposures. We need to get rid of some of them. Some of them have been around since the 1950s, some since the 1920s. And we need to prevent people from ever developing in the first place. If you have it, you need to limit you've already lost about 60% of your nerve cells in the part of the area of the brain that controls movement. You need to limit any future exposure. So buy organic, wash your fruits and vegetables, put a water filter, and wear a helmet when you ski or bike. And then get a good clinician and exercise. So exercise has been shown to be quite helpful for people with Parkinson's disease. It can decrease your risk of ever developing Parkinson's disease. So if you don't have Parkinson's and you're my age, sweat 3.5 to 4 hours a week. And then if you have Parkinson's, find a great clinician. If you have questions about Parkinson's disease, you can just email me at info@endingpd.org. I'll put that in the chat, info@endingpd.org.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done, and a lot more, hopefully a lot more spotlight is being shined on this disease, because so many more people are being impacted by it, that hopefully we'll get more information as we learn more through the research you and others are doing. So that's fabulous to hear. Isan, getting back to some of the questions on the technical side, there were questions, and we actually saw this. I don't know how many people experienced this, but there was a lag in the video, from the internet connection that you were showing. What impact do people have to have high quality, high speed internet, or does that impact at all the ability of the system to work, or is it all being done locally as the videos are being captured locally? And if you have low quality internet connection, it just takes longer to do the analysis because you're shipping the data off.
Right. If you notice, we build the technology on a computer, so there's no app, because if you use the app, then there's a huge variability, because I can put the phone somewhere else, go far, the positioning changes a lot. So just to decrease the variability, we now made a website. And then when you go to the website, we cannot control the different configuration people have. Some will have high bandwidth, some will have not good bandwidth, some will not finish the task, some will go out of the frame like this. So our philosophy is that we let people do whatever they have to, and whatever data that we get back, we use that noise as a feature so that it still works with incomplete data. Because if you want this to be used by everybody with low bandwidth, with low quality computer or low quality webcam, we need to get all that samples and push on the technology side to still make sense of this. So that's where we have been. And the idea is that if you have enough data from a different environment, hopefully you can model it and still make it work.
Great. And Ray, on the, I think this is probably a question for you, but maybe Isan, you can answer this as well. There's been a lot of questions about trying to differentiate Parkinson's versus other neurological disorders, or if someone has a previous injury or something like that that is causing, so there could be other underlying factors other than Parkinson's causing some of these anomalies that you see in what you call Parkinson's patients now, some of the movement and speech disorders. How do you differentiate, or does it not matter at that point, that what the underlying cause is? You just want to detect that there are differences from sort of the standard population.
Yeah, so as Isan pointed out, most of the research studies have been focused on Parkinson's versus non-Parkinson's disease. So that's the first bar to cross. And then the second bar to cross is Parkinson's versus, other potential mimics of Parkinson's. There's a whole range of conditions, multiple systems atrophy, and a lot of other Parkinsonian disorders. That's going to be harder to do, and that's planned for the future. I would say in the near term, we're looking at this can be a screening tool, not to say that you definitively have Parkinson's, but this is like, you have a high probability of having Parkinson's and therefore should be seen by a clinician. I think there are a lot of people out there, maybe some people listening right now, who are wondering if they themselves or a family or a friend has Parkinson's, and wouldn't it be nice to be able to do a 2-minute, 5-minute test in your home right now to determine what the likelihood of you're having Parkinson's, and get maybe either some reassurance or some concerning evidence that might prompt you to be seen for what is a eminently treatable condition.
Another question that's come in about, I guess on the ethical side of this, how do you counteract algorithmic racial bias or demographically lopsided data sets? So, you mentioned that this is probably a very Rochester-centric data set right now because of where we are and how we're doing things. How do you ensure that there aren't inherent, I don't think you can ever ensure that there aren't inherent biases, but how do you account for those biases or try to minimize those biases?
I mean, this is an exciting area of research right now in computer science to eliminate this. So I'm glad that not only us, but a lot of people are asking these questions. For example, certain individuals may be at a more risk of having Parkinson. So how do you really provide a prior probability to them? Because because of who they are, perhaps the data needs to be looked at a bit more carefully. So that's all part of the ongoing work. And hopefully we can address that with more technical details down the road, because right now we have intuitions, but it's ongoing work.
Great. And what about for,
can I say, we're explicitly trying to eventually bring this research study to different populations around the world. So I think, we're doing this nationally right now. I think we're enrolling people in another study with Professor Hoke, with participants, from Tennessee and Hawaii and all over the country. And we don't think there's any reason that this couldn't be rolled out to people throughout the world. Vast majority of them have never been diagnosed, even though they have a treatment.
And what about for people who speak a different language? Are the from the audio cues, is it the same cues? You just have to find a different phrasing that they use, or Ray, do they use this in other countries? Are there similar types of treatment of detection methodologies that are used in other countries?
So right now we have an ongoing study in Bangladesh where we have translated the entire web page into Bengali, and we have found relevant Bengali sentences that they could read, and we have collected ample amount of data. So I know that there's one other student, undergrad from UFR, who translated in Chinese as well, and we tried to get data from China. So it's an ongoing work. We understand that in order for this to scale, we need to translate this to the local culture. We cannot expect people to come and read the English, and we have had some successes from certain countries.
Great. And Ray, is the treatment, is the detection approaches around the world, are they fairly similar?
I think there are. This is cutting edge, so Azan will know what other groups are doing it. There aren't a lot of groups doing this. The idea that you can use a smartphone to diagnose Parkinson's disease is an idea that's about 7 years old. So there are some groups in Asia, but I can't list 10 different groups. Azan, any thoughts?
Right. I mean, our algorithm and expression is very robust. And there's existing literature that some expressions are universal, like the way you smile, the way you raise my eyebrow. So at least for those data, it should be rapidly scalable from all over the world. And the speech task, we're going to see some variability, because depending on what language you speak, there might be certain variability. But at least for the finger tapping as well as expression, it should be robust.
Right. Well, I would imagine this would be very welcome, especially in some areas. Ray, you were talking about the dearth of doctors here in this country, and I'd imagine that's even worse in many other places around the world. So having this type of technology is fantastic. I'll just ask one last question, because I know we have to wrap up fairly soon, but what do you sort of see as the future of this marriage between technology and medicine? This is really, really exciting, and it's wonderful to see these results in Parkinson's. Do you think this has potential for many, many other diseases? And do you see that as sort of, Essam, from your perspective, a direction that's exciting for computer science to go? And Ray, from your perspective, a direction that medicine is heading?
Nobody wants to go first.
She said your name first, so I was following that.
Right. So I think from a computer scientist, it's nice to look into passive sensing, where I'm not really bringing participants into the clinic or instrumenting them with devices. They're home, and we're now able to collect data while they're going about their daily activities, and making sense of that data is very exciting. So Parkinson is just one example, but imagine we can also find examples of fall detection with the ataxia. We talked about how they walk. Imagine that technology being applied to finding out whether they're likely to fall, or maybe the way they speak, whether you can see whether they are showing signs of Alzheimer. So with the passive sensing, it just opens up the entire world, and we can do a lot more that we couldn't do even a few years ago.
So the vision of our Center for Health and Technology is that anyone, anywhere can receive care, and that anyone, anywhere can participate in research. So how do you go about doing that? I think you do that by technology. We all carry around with us, supercomputers, and these tools, which are increasingly available to larger and larger populations around the world, can one, bring research studies to participants, two, enable them to be screened for diseases like Parkinson's and a wide range of other conditions. And then three, instead of information coming in, information can come back out, through a clinician so that people can receive care. It's almost a closed loop system. And these new platforms of healthcare are no longer hospitals and clinics, but increasingly are going to be homes and mobile devices. And so we think that's the future of healthcare. And we put an article in the chat on new platforms of healthcare that articulates that vision.
Fabulous. Well, I want to thank you both so much, Isan and Ray, for spending time and sharing your really exciting research with us, just based on the questions that just keep coming in rapid fire. We have only gotten to a fraction of the questions that came in. This was a topic that really resonated with a lot of our audience. So I want to thank you very much again for all the wonderful information. And I'd like to invite Abby back to give some closing remarks.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Dorsey, Professor Hoekendien Heintzelman, for that engaging and informative session. Your work is incredible, and I look forward to reading your book and continuing to follow your research and developments. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we would like to hear your feedback. Please take a moment to share your thoughts about the session through a brief anonymous survey. The link for the survey will appear on your screen at the end of the webinar. Select Continue to get to the survey. Please also plan to join us on Tuesday, January 25th at 6 p.m. for the Black Alumni Network's first anniversary celebration event, Stories from the Boardroom, Experiences of Our Black Leaders. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Stay well.